Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our work session for this evening for the 2021-2022 Radford City budget. Joining us this evening are our council members and several members of staff as we talk through some of the particulars of the budget. A couple of weeks ago, we had David Ridpath. Actually, it was just last Monday, I guess it was, present us with the overview of the budget, taking a look at what we thought we were going to be able to do in the next fiscal year. And since that time, we have received our budget books that we've been able to pick up and go through, and hopefully we can talk about any questions anyone has and talk through the general plans. So what I thought I would do, there's not going to be any formal presentation tonight. David, do you have any thoughts before we get started?
No, you led us into that real good, Mayor. Thank you. As you all know, this has been kind of a extensive budget session this go round. We started back with audit, which kicks us off on all of things as far as what's happened over the past year. So we did that back in January. Not long after that, did a little overview of how we were looking in FY21, how we expect this year to go, and then moved into the presentation of the actual budget for FY22. So three different pieces, past, present, and future, are involved in putting all this information together. So I've gotten a few comments that I've tried to answer along the way. So please just let me know what questions you've got. And I've got Callista on here as well, and our finance director. So we'll try to answer any questions you all may have.
So what would probably help us to get started is just the nature of the questions that have already been asked and answered, so that we don't go through that all again if we all have the same questions. Or is there anything that makes sense for all of us to talk about?
Pretty much we've got all the agency funding is in there. Those have been most of the questions. Many of you sit on boards and commissions. The agency funding is either at formula based on how it's set up by the state or our code, or we've been able to meet the expectations depending on the number of Radford citizens that are served by that organization. There is one new one that we've added. The Christiansburg Institute is in there. This year, it's something that you all have received, I think, a couple of requests on, 2 or 3 requests on. So we do have them in the budget at the present time.
Okay. Just to clarify, everything in this current budget is funded through the revenue that is generated now. There is no one-time money that's reflected in this budget at this time. I know I asked that last time we met, but I just wanted to reiterate because I think that's kind of an important element for us to keep in mind.
That is correct. When anybody takes a look at the budget, you will see some FY20, which was the initial CARES Act money that we got in late May of 20 that was audited. And then in 21, we have about additional roughly $2 million. That's illustrated in that budget because it's already in place, but we have not accounted for any expectations of CARES Act money or any special funding that might come during the course of the year. As you all know, as we get into each meeting, once a new fiscal year starts, if we get any special grants or any special appropriations, special funding, we come to you guys for appropriation.
Well, what I thought I would do then is go around to each of the council members and let them ask any questions that they have. We have 2 new members who this is your first budget you're getting a chance to look at. So if you'd like, we can start with you to see what questions you have. Forrest, what questions do you have for us to get us rolling?
Sorry, I lost my mute button there for a second. To be honest, I'm good for the moment. Like I said, this is the first time I'm still digesting a lot of this. There's a lot to digest here, so I'm happy to pass for now, and you can come back to me if something comes up.
Okay, Onassis, what do you have?
There's nothing particularly odd or strange in it. We tried to be, as I mentioned last week, tried to be as conservative as possible when it came to looking at revenues, making sure the expenses were things that we actually really needed to make things go. So try to keep that in place. The revenue side, To go back, Mayor, it does reflect revenues that we think we will be receiving during the course of the year, and it does include that bump for the tax rate to account for the debt service from McCart Elementary School.
Okay. And you always go conservative on that. So, I mean, when you look at a range of possibilities, you tend to plan for the low range. And if we get the high range, that's fine.
Yeah, the only time that hasn't come into play, of course, COVID affected us the last year and a half. So normally
Right.
we hit pretty close to the mark. So we're really pleased that we're able to do that.
Okay. Onassis, what questions do you have?
Yeah, nothing at this moment. David actually answered my questions during last city council meeting, so thank you for that. If anything does arise, I will, of course, ask questions as we go along.
Okay.
Yep. This is an ongoing process, so anything that y'all may think of, shoot me an email, and we'll address it at the next time we get together.
Jesse, I know you've been out of town, and I don't know how much time you've had to digest this. Do you have any questions you can think of off the start? I do want to come back to funding of salaries and everything along that line in just a few minutes, but do you have any questions that come off the top of your head?
Yes, one line item, of course, that I advocated for last year was funding for the American Legion to shore up their building. And I'm not sure where we are with that. If they, sorry about that. If they spent that money, if that was completed, or if that's something that we're moving on into the next budget. Sorry.
They obviously have an opinion about it. So, you know, it's
always fun at my house. So anyway, is that American Legion money, have we secured the building? I know Councilman Barras is a member of the Legion and was working with them on this as well. I'm just not sure if they've spent it, if that has been done. If not, I know with COVID, it made things a little bit, I think, disjointed. So I don't know where we are with that project.
As I recall on that, I think you all had a lot of interest in that project. They were still trying to get some pieces together. The last time we talked, we were just looking to do a special appropriation whenever that came in, whether it was in the current year or in next fiscal year. And I have not heard anything lately, unless Onassis, you or Jesse or somebody else has heard from any of the folks with the American Legion. I know they were looking to get as many donations, and I think they were seeking some grants through Lowe's and a couple of other places. So I have not heard where the shortfall was. I think the focus was on the roof and some of the trim that was rotting, the basic things to be sure that the building was going to be, longevity of that was going to be good.
Yeah, in terms of funding, the funding for the materials portion secured. So Home Depot out of Christiansburg did a great job stepping up and giving a ton of money. That's the best mathematical number I can give you. A ton of money towards the actual materials. And so what the American Legion was seeking was the funding to pay for the labor portion of it, since the gift cards for Home Depot does not, of course, cover the labor. So any funding or appropriation the city would do would go towards the labor piece to pay for the projects in terms of soffit repair, roof repair, sealing off the chimney, those things that have caused that water erosion, also replacing the gutters as well. So that's where we stand right now with the American Legion in terms of being able to pay for the labor portion. The materials portion paid for by Home Depot, thank you. But in terms of labor, still need funding.
I know we were waiting to see if there were going to be any private donations toward that. And I know there was some issue with a bank account getting set up. Are we set for that to where if we wanted to do the fundraising campaign, that could happen?
Yes, we are. We're with First Community Bank right there on Tyler. So the bank account is set up. Now, these are some older vets. So in terms of setting up a link to the donations, well, it's a little challenge technology-wise from that perspective, but the bank account is set up.
Okay. Jesse, did you have any other questions?
I guess what I'm a little bit confused on then is what exactly we need to do to go ahead and move forward to get that, at least the water remediation, get that portion taken care of. Do you know, Councilman Barras, is there what the next step is? Because I know that council had agreed to pay for the work in regards to already having the supplies. So how do we go about that? Are we prepared to
Just a
do that?
quick, we had appropriated 5,000 for it last year, so that was all we had set
Is
up.
that how much it was? I
That's
thought
how much we had
did
done, because we talked
a
about
higher
that in
amount.
Christiansburg Institute at a similar time. And we were looking at 5,000 at both, that we could potentially do, depending on whatever match we had with private gifts and things along that line. I don't know what our final estimate was.
And I guess if I remember correctly, the ask was for about 15,000. That's just to shore up the building to make sure there was no more water damage done, and then we could get the volunteers inside. So I thought that we as a council did vote to cover that initial cost since we already had the materials covered. And it is from a grant, so it is. I'm sure it's time sensitive. I'm not certain they're just going to keep that grant open indefinitely. But if I remember correctly, and maybe David Ridpath can help us out with that, but I'm pretty sure that we agreed to cover that initial phase, if I'm not mistaken.
When y'all had, you're correct, both the Christiansburg Institute and American Legion, I think were the same night. You all considered both and said you would take a look as we go forward. And I think all you were waiting on from the American Legion was just the documentation. Some of the work had been done, and get them to submit that so you all could formally appropriate it. So we have not seen anything come back through them from them for a while now. I don't know if Onassis, if you were kind of the liaison, I wasn't sure if you had heard anything from them at this point. I think they were shooting for if I can remember correctly, the end of this fiscal year. So it was the May-June timeframe, I think. So we're, it's almost April. We're coming up on that period of time, but I have not heard anything yet recently.
And unfortunately, this is my first time hearing an actual dollar amount. I know Jesse and I spoke before, and Rich Lickman from American Legion had asked me about funding that he'd heard the city council had approved, but this is my first time hearing about the actual dollar amount. So the first phase, as Jesse alluded, Councilman Foster alluded to, is the 14.5 is roughly a phase one, which covers the roof, soffit repair, gutter repair, and then also creates a drainage that allows the water to run off into the ravine. If there, I guess, to Councilman Foster's point, I guess what's our next step in terms of the materials are paid for, and so or we're paid for through gift card. I guess how do we move forward in terms of appropriating the funds so the work can begin? And as far as work beginning, George, just remind what's the last name of the repair in Christiansburg, George. Drawing a blank right now on the last name, but it will do the repairs in terms of who the company to do the repairs is out of Christiansburg. Crockett Home Improvement. There you go. You're blank.
David, were you saying that they needed to get the work done and then submit the invoice after the work was done?
You can appropriate based on estimate. If they have an estimate and can send that to us, we can get it to you all. If it's 5,000, 10,000, whatever the amount is that council's comfortable with. Once we get that, then we will do an appropriation, and then they will file, so they'll know that the money is there, and then they'll file invoices for the and I think y'all were leaning towards the labor part of it, and somebody else was doing the materials, I believe is the way it was. So that's all we need is just some billing after that fact for the hours of work, who was doing it, whether it's Crockett Home Improvement or whoever.
Well, how about this?
I know I mentioned to council that this first step, why it's so critical, is that it's one that we really can't rely on volunteers for. So this is going to take that professional component in order to complete. Once it's completed, we have long list of volunteers, and then we can get busy doing the many projects that will take on the inside. But I don't see that being near as costly because we can rely a lot on our volunteers. This first step, this water remediation, we have to rely on the professionals for. So that's why this first initial step is the most important, in my opinion. Then I don't think it will require much more from council. because I think the rest we can then work on volunteers. We can also do some fundraising for. There are smaller projects I think that will be easier, probably a little bit more catchy that people would want to volunteer for. It's just not as sexy volunteering for a roof. So, I think that once we get that done, we can break it into smaller projects and create some enthusiasm around those smaller projects. This one is just, we just have to kind of bite the bullet on and just complete.
How about this? Why don't we get an actual written estimate for the labor piece, and then a confirmation that we have all the materials costs that would be covered as part of that, so we can consider that. And then when we have another work session, or if we want to meet a few minutes before we go into the public hearing, we can talk through that a little bit. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, that would be great. The one thing I wanted to ask Councilman Burress too, because I know he was a part of the initial phase of getting the initial cost. Do we have several different organizations or companies that have come in and given us an idea on what the project would cost?
Yes, well, two companies, George Crockett Home Improvement and another one out of Pulaski, as well, has given us two estimates. Of the two, the most comprehensive plan is George Crockett, also the best value as well.
Okay. Was he volunteering some of his time, or?
No, not volunteering time, but he was giving us a considerable discount on the labor.
Okay. I was thinking that there was something else he was throwing in to help with the project.
Correct.
Okay.
So does that sound fair to everybody, that we can get a written estimate and then a list of everything we're going to need materials wise to make sure we're covered there before we go ahead and sign off on that? Is that good? Good. All right. Thank you all very much. Jesse, did you have anything more?
Not at this time. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Naomi, what do you have?
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. I have a couple of questions. First of all, David, I did not catch that the Christiansburg Institute was funded in the budget. So thank you very much for doing that and putting that in there. Could you tell us how much we're including that?
We've got 2,500 in there. I think they had asked for 5,000 or 3,500 or something like that. Since this was their initial ask, and you haven't got an agreement or anything like that for performance, 2,500 looked like a comfortable number. That's kind of where we start. A lot of organizations when this is their when this is their first time, so that it gives us a placeholder and gets them started. And then as our year progresses, if things look better, you can get they can come back and we can see about expanding that amount in FY22.
Wonderful. Okay.
If everybody's comfortable with that to start with.
And I think we had them go through that regular agency request process, correct, David?
Yes, yeah, they did. So that was a good thing. They did go through the agency process this year. I don't know yet what the other localities are doing. I think Christiansburg and Montgomery County were funding them, and the Institute is, of course, home to that location. I'm not sure yet about Pulaski or Blacksburg.
Great. Well, yeah, again, I'm thrilled that that made it in there. I didn't catch it on my first go through of the budget. So I'm absolutely delighted that we got that in there. I know that's going to make a big difference to them, and it's going to be very appreciated. And now I wanted to turn to some of the, not quite salary, David, I know we're going to get into that conversation later, but just related to the positions that we're filling and what's not being filled. I did notice that we're not going to be, we don't have budgeted an assistant city manager position this go around. And that got me thinking about what other positions we may not be planning to fill. Could you sort of go through the positions that we don't have budgeted for at the moment that remain unfilled? And along those lines, okay, I'm also curious of those positions, how long they have been unfilled. Just sort of give us a general overview of that.
Callista, Dawn, y'all are on. Help me if you can help me remember. I know we've got a position in finance that's not filled. There's a position in HR that's not filled. Any positions we've had vacant, which we've had some ongoing ones just because it's been difficult to get positions filled. So we've tried to, while they are funded in the budget, there is some gap there because they're not, we're having some overlap where there's not somebody filling the position at the current time that will end up being reflected at the end of the year. And those roughly, I would say, are around $300,000 to $400,000 worth of positions.
Okay.
Throughout the budget.
How do you intend, hopefully, as things become more clear and we're able to begin fulfilling these positions, how do you intend to prioritize, where's the need the highest in terms of filling some of these positions that we don't have the people in right now?
Certainly making sure that the city services are all being met first, sanitation, make sure water area, we've got some vacancies there that we're trying to get filled. That's probably one of my highest priority areas, to make sure we can get water lines, everything is fine and we're able to get everything done. But it stretches the crew when you have a lot of issues happen at one time. So we've been trying to divide into 2 crews. So hopefully we can get those positions filled, finish filling the ones in public works, and then as the economy improves, work on some of the administrative positions.
Okay. And do we currently have any vacancies in the police department?
Jeff, I think, is on, but we've got, I think there's one maybe over in communications that they're about to get filled. And I think we've got 1 or 2 officers that we've kept. Public services, public safety, we've kept those positions filled, whether it's in EMS or in fire or over in the sheriff's area.
Great. And then the last question that I had for now was about legal services, and I'm gonna look specifically at page. Could this possibly be page 2? Yeah, looks like
right at the front. It says council. Yep.
So I'm looking at actual 2020 was 157, actual 2021 is 69,485, and then we're budgeting this year for 120, and that's kind of a big, that bounces around quite a bit. I was wondering if you could sort of walk us through your calculations on those numbers.
Sure. You may recall we have legal services on retainer, which is basically the 120 that we budget each year. That's for the council meeting attendance and that kind of thing. It is lower. It's kind of hard to guess what was going to happen between now and the end of the year. We haven't had to have in-person meetings as much. That's had some savings. We haven't had as many projects. That's had some savings as well. And what in the 20 budget, the actual, a lot of that was the litigation associated with the opioid litigation, some of the special projects that you have. So that's in addition to the retainer. Some things are covered in that, basic things, but larger projects, usually you hope for a recoup on the other end of it. So most of those deal, I'm trying to think what else. We had 2 or 3 other things. We had the, Mike helped us at the water plant with the chlorine issue we had back last year. Opioid comes to mind, and there was another one. I'm trying to think. Those are kind of the 3 that were running the number up a little bit. But we think we're going to be probably at or just under the 120 for this year.
Okay, great. All right. Yeah,
those don't know of anything major for the upcoming year either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Those were the 3 primary questions that jumped out at me first. So that's good for me for right now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. David, I had some questions about total number of city employees, and then to look at the compensation piece. I know we all want to talk about that. We really wanted to try to do something this past year and couldn't figure it out for the 2021 budget. And we want to try to figure out something for 21-22. Just to bring people up to speed, the state has approved a 5% increase in state salaries. And I believe that comes directly from Richmond, correct? For those people that are on the city staff, like, for example, our constitutional officer staff and people like that, they receive their salary through, it may come through the city, but it comes funded from the state. Is that accurate?
That's correct. Not every constitutional office, not all the positions, like at the treasurer's office, the city has several positions that are ours. Same thing in the commissioner's office. CIT over in the sheriff's department. That's a special fund, but that has nothing to do with the state. But all of the state positions, all those positions that were assigned the 5%, that has been included in the budget, and that's a pass through. They send all the money to us throughout the course of the year for those reimbursements.
But with that, there are some people who literally could be sitting side by side doing very similar roles. And if one person is a city employee and one person is a state employee, right now the state has authorized a 5% increase and put the money in the budget for that. But we have yet to adjust any pay or anything along that line. And that's our responsibility to take a look at. Is that accurate?
Yes, there have been times where the state has not advanced, or it's been a 2%, or it's been midway
Right.
through the year, that kind of thing. So we do it whenever the state sends the recommendation on or approved budget from their approved budget.
How many full-time employees do we have right now? Is it 154? Is that number accurate, or am I way off?
We have 204 full-time and 54 part-time across
Okay.
all positions.
All right. So that those that are
And
observing,
the majority of those are in the obviously in the general fund. For the
right?
police and fire, the service type things that we provide from the administrative side, most of all that is in the general fund.
So for those folks who are watching us in on our work session and for our edification, at this point, we need to decide how much do we feel comfortable raising salaries with the revenues and resources that we have, knowing that some employees in the city that are on the state contract have a 5% raise coming from the state, and the fact that the minimum wage in Virginia will increase to $11 an hour in January of 2022. So during this fiscal year, the minimum we will be expected to pay someone is $11 an hour. And I don't think we're already at that level for everything that we fund, particularly part-time. Correct, David?
That's correct. Well, we'll have several adjustments that will need to be made in January, and then we'll have to look across the board at compression as well. If depending on the amount, if you go with recommendation, then we should be okay with what will happen in January without any changes.
And what we're trying to figure out is what we're able to do. We want to do as much as we can. We so appreciate everyone who helps us, but what is feasible and sustainable, because whatever we build into this year's budget then is part of the base of next year's budget, and so on and so forth as we move forward. We've looked at 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%. I think council, you all have those figures to consider. Where are you thinking, and what are your thoughts related to that compensation? Anybody want to start us off? I'll start real quick while everybody's thinking. I think it's a concern to fall too far behind the state increases as they go into effect. That is competition. Some of our neighbors are looking at increases as well. I want to be incredibly respectful to our taxpayers and to the citizens of the community. But what can happen is we can be penny wise, pound foolish sometimes, where we don't look at some level increase as we go along. And then we have to do a real big make good for an area or for the entire city 5 years down the road, 3 years down the road, to try to make us more competitive, to be able to hire people and where things have fallen behind. So I'm at least at a 3% level with potentially a 1% bonus. Now, I don't know what that does getting us close to the $11 an hour. And the only reason I say that is, does that make sense for sustainability moving forward with what we build into the budget? And I don't know where everybody else is. I will open up the floor for thoughts on that.
Well, I'll begin just by asking David Ridpath to give us some education on that, about your comfort level with building this into the budget in the future. I will say that I agree with either a 3 or a 4%. Our city workers and employees have gone above and beyond in a year when we have not been able in the past to provide them. with a COLA or a bonus. And so, my inclination right away is to very, very gratefully give them the increase that we can afford. David, I'll ask you to help provide some explanation for David Horton's questions, because you know better than we do about long-term implications for the various levels. So I would turn that back to you. But just my position is that we owe it to our city employees to give as much as we can.
Well, thank you. We're a people business. I mean, you cannot do everything across the board, no matter where you are and what department. It is people focused throughout the pandemic. Each and every day, the employees come out, no matter what the conditions are or concerns. They get the job done. They work throughout the pandemic. We just expected a lot, and they've just risen to the occasion every single time. So greatly appreciate all that they have done. The numbers that I had included in the budget, they're sustainable, knowing that we were not able to give a raise or cost of living last year. We also were not able to do a bonus last year. So we're taking into effect, try to catch back up. And I think it's been mentioned before and mentioned maybe at one of our other meetings. The other thing this does help us with, not only in looking at what's going on at the state level, but then also making sure that we're staying competitive. We don't want to lose employees to other jurisdictions, and we're watching what they're doing. It looks like most are looking at 3% and 4% as they're going forward, or 3% and a bonus, something like that. But in essence, between the past 2 years are at the 4% mark or better. So I felt comfortable in the number I was recommending. I think that is sustainable for this upcoming year, knowing that we're continuing to improve, the economy's getting better, and that catches us back up and helps us retain employees and keeps us from running any issues with compression or the minimum wage.
Could you help me understand the distinction between a 3% with a 1% bonus and a 4%?
Yeah, basically across the budget, of course, each when we're looking at the budget, we're looking at employees in each section. So the salaries are divided between the general fund, and then also between the enterprise fund, sanitation, the electric fund, water, wastewater, for example, and then also streets. And that funding for street fund comes out of our VDOT allocation. So when we're looking at how that works, the total is about an $89,000 to $100,000 each 1% increase that you have across the board. We did have some savings. That was one of the things that was particularly helpful in moving forward, is that we had about an $80,000 savings, at least initially, on healthcare. We think it's going to be more than that, but I want to be conservative. So that was already 1% there, plus looking at what we had last year and trying to catch everybody back up. Is that kind of what you're looking for? Answer your question?
Well, and let me offer this. If we program in 3% into salaries, that 3% will be in the budget already next year. So like if my salary was $1,000 and I added the 3%, it's $1,000.03. And if I do 1,000, it's 1,004. If we do a 1% bonus, at least we've given them the same amount of money for this year. We can see where that healthcare cost goes and how we're doing coming out of the pandemic before we build that into the long-term budget. It might mean that next year we do another 2 or 3 or 4, whatever we're able to do, that would pick that back up as well, but it doesn't commit us to it and have to either cut salaries or cut other services. Does that make sense as to why we might consider that?
It does. I tend to prefer the idea of giving city staff the stability that comes with knowing, what the level is, rather than relying on a bonus. But it does clarify that for me.
And I do too.
I'm sure that you do. That's my inclination is to rather than rely on the bonus, to rely on the salary.
I want to do as much as we can. I think the biggest thing that I'm worried about is what our true number is going to be like coming out of the next year. And with the commitments that we're having to make this year for the schools and everything else, that health insurance has been great, but we're a heart surgery or a serious illness or two away from that not being a 1% savings as well. And I think it's awesome. I hope we keep on that trend and everything stays the same. I was just thinking about that in terms of how it could impact us. It's a penny. It's a penny or penny and a half on the real estate tax, depending on what we choose to do. And we need to just consider that carefully before we go ahead with it. David, I know you had something, then Jesse, I'm going to come right back to you.
Just one more comment. I think the difference between the healthcare and of course rewarding the employees for everything that they've done and all that they continue to do, but also we do generally I have that in savings throughout the year with the vacancies on and off as we go through the year. Sometimes a position will sit vacant for a couple of months while you're trying to find somebody to hire. So we usually have $300,000 in salaries and benefits that are saved. The other thing about COLA versus the bonus is that the COLA does go towards credible comp, which helps them in their VRS in the long term. It goes to the bottom line so that they're able to compare their salary with a salary in another jurisdiction or some similar range in pay.
Jesse, what did you have?
I was just going to say, in the research that I've done for 2022, it looks like the COLA estimate is about 2.4%. I do feel like our city workers, they've really met every task and challenge that has been thrown at them. I do think that we have got to give them a cost of living, but what I'm concerned about is we talk about raising taxes a penny and how many dollars does that equate to? But I can tell you that a dollar doesn't mean the same to all of our citizens. For some, those pennies mean a little bit more. And I do sit on the DSS board, and I can tell you that our benefit programs right now are utilized more than they were the prior year. So what we really have to be mindful of is, I think we all agree that a COLA is appropriate and a priority. I do think we have to be careful at the advance that we make towards that when we are not fully recovered from the pandemic. Our citizens are still struggling, and there is a direct correlation between money we spend in this budget and the money that we are asking our community members to fork out to pay for it. So, while all of these different things sound good, we also have to be mindful that we are asking taxpayers to reach deeper into their pockets when their pockets might be a little bit thin right now. So I'm comfortable even going, with the 2.4 as being the average. I'm comfortable going to that 3%, but I'm a little reluctant to burden our taxpayers anymore. Remember, we also increased taxes to pay for the school bill. So I'm just wanting to say to council, I think we have to be conscientious and cautious about what we build into this budget. That's why if we're looking at that 3%, I'm more comfortable looking at a bonus above that for the again, COVID challenges that they've all had to rise to meet. I'm a little uncomfortable with adding much more to the budget that is recurring.
If I could just get a clarification, though, it's my understanding that we're having this conversation about a penny increase, and I appreciate that for the illustration that it provides. But the increase that we're anticipating with our budget goes directly to McHarg, and it does not go to funding the salaries. And so that's a commitment that we've made, but. And, of course, every time that, you're spending money somewhere, you're not spending it somewhere else. But it's not my understanding that by giving a 4% COLA, we would require another penny cent on our tax increase. So,
right, David, that's not for this year. I'm just thinking, looking out for the future as to what that would be, depending on where our costs are. And yeah, you're right. We don't have to raise taxes. We can do the 4% in some way, shape, or form with the budget balanced as the way it is with the current resources. That was something why I'd wanted to stress that at the beginning. I just was thinking through the mechanism a little bit. One of the things we've been trying to do is think a 2 and 3 year period as opposed to 1 year at a time. And things like this, as awesome as they are to raise the salaries, which we absolutely should do, add a burden, add a cost expectation for us in next year's budget already. And that was the only piece that if things didn't look quite as good and if our savings weren't quite as good next year, that extra percent might give us the wiggle room. We might be able to correct next year because I think we'll be in a much stronger position 12 months from now. But I don't know what the next 12 months are really going to look like. And, you know, so much is going to surge immediately, and then we'll see where the real economy is going to be after some of the stimulus spending goes through. I think all that's just so many unknowns. And to Jesse's point, you know, I think that's just the prudent way to do it. I'm open to the discussion for the other. I just want to get it on the floor that if we do that option, that gives us slightly more flexibility in the future for rather than saying, okay, we gave you 4% last year. We're going to have to cut it 1% this year or raise taxes, if that makes sense in that sense. But I would like to ask our newer council members, you know, this is the first debate like this you all have been a part of. What are your thoughts on this? Forrest, what are you thinking?
I actually would just before I speak more, I would ask Jesse maybe to, if you wouldn't mind expounding a little bit, if we were to go at 3%, how would you envision using that extra 1%? You mentioned potentially a bonus, but do you see it potentially being used elsewhere, or what are your thoughts?
I think that a bonus is appropriate if we want to go ahead and meet them at that 4% amount. And I guess, you know, let me also expand on my comment about taxes. Anything that we put in this budget is paid for by taxes. Anything that's reoccurring, that comes from the taxpayers. So if we increase something, we either cut something or we increase the demand from our community. So, you know, it's really apples to apples. If we increase something, that money has to come from somewhere. And I feel like our budget is fairly lean the way it is. So unless we're wanting to cut other positions or downgrade other positions, the budget this going forward, we have to really consider that. So what I would feel more comfortable with, as I was saying, is let's do the 3%. That's still higher than the 2.4 that they're saying is the actual COLA. Let's go ahead and meet them at that 4% because we're all in agreement that this has been a pretty challenging time. So we give it to them at that one-time bonus. The next year, as the mayor said, let's reevaluate and see how we're doing as a city, because we've had grant money that has come in. So it may give us in some way a false sense of security because we've actually had an infusion of other money to get us past the worst part of COVID. Hopefully it's the worst part of COVID. So I think we're very smart with budgeting just based on what we always have, not based on any grant money we may or may not get. So when you're looking at that budget, I think it behooves us to still be a little conservative on this. Go the 3% that they can count on. Let's do that extra 1% in a bonus to tell them thank you so very much. Next year, let's see where we're at. There's a lot of unknowns still that make me uncomfortable. I think we have a lot of good things in the works that the community is going to see some benefits from, and that certainly will allow us to maybe beef it up. I want those things to come to maturation first.
Does that answer your question for us?
Yeah, no, that's helpful. So yeah, I sense and understand the struggle here and the tension. It feels kind of like a catch-22. Obviously, this has been an extremely difficult year for so many, and so many in our city. So many of our city staff have worked so differently and so much harder over the past year, and so wanting to make sure they know that they're heard and that they're being thanked, and being able to do that in a way that's not just with words, but you know, with some money. I feel that 100%. But then feeling what Jesse was talking about on the flip side, whether it's an immediate tax impact or a potential future tax impact on the rest of our citizens who have also felt the burden of this past year. Like I said, catch-22. And when I first saw that number that David, you sent over of the COLA, each percent being about 89,000 each percent, I saw how similar that number was to the real estate tax number, which I think is 87 around there. And yeah, and so I mean, like I said, I really feel that tension. I definitely think, in hearing this conversation, it makes more sense to go with the 3% COLA this year. But I do feel the tension in all ways. So I do want to be clear that we are very appreciative of the city staff and everything they're doing. And this conversation isn't about what they deserve, because they deserve more than we can give them.
That's the truth.
I think that's very clear. Yeah, I think that's all I have to say for now, but I appreciate everyone's thoughts throughout this conversation.
And just one more piece to this. My intention with this would be to build the 1% in permanently next year if we're in a much better place, along with any other COLA we might have. This would just give us that flexibility. So what I tried to do when I was thinking through this was to look at the raise that is obviously deserved in pay, because it does affect retirement and everything else. But what could we do to be fair with actual dollars for this year? And the dollars would be the same, David, right? I mean, if we do the 1% bonus and the 3% raise, it would basically work out to the same dollars.
No, it'd be a little 1%. If it's a bonus of 1% and you're going to do that at Christmas or whenever, it would not go to credible comp, so it won't go to VRS or anything like that. It'll just be a one-time.
But in terms of the actual dollars the person receives, it's pretty much a wash, right? And it costs us about the same.
Yeah, I'd have to look at that, but it's probably pretty close. Something else you might, just listening to you all talk, something else you might want to consider too is if you're looking at 3% doing that July 1, and if you want to hold 1% until December and just see how things go between now and then you can kick in the 1% at December. Then that that will also help us with that, with the change of things coming in January with minimum wage and that kind of thing. I don't know, that's just another thought. I just listen to you all talk. If you want to do 3% July 1 and then do 1%, December 1st or January 1st or whatever.
Onassis, what are your thoughts?
Well, my first question would be to David Ridpath. I guess, where do we stand currently in terms of from a competitive salary perspective in relation to Pulaski's, Blacksburg, what have you? Because I've heard a lot of talk about, the fact that they do deserve it, right? Because trash, sanitation.
As of this past year, we keep those salaries updated. We did a salary study a couple of years ago.
Okay.
We've been keeping those up. We fell a little behind because some others did cost of livings last year that we didn't do. And that's our worry for the upcoming year is if there's cost of living last year and then there's another cost of living this year, we may fall behind over that.
It's a bigger chasm.
We do try to keep those up with everybody else.
Okay. And so if you had to rank us in terms of competitiveness and pay, I guess, where will we stand in comparison to our peers and partners in the area?
I'd say we're staying pretty good.
Okay.
We may be just slightly behind over this past year. We got to look at how that impacts. If everybody else went up 2 or 3% over the past year and we didn't, we're going to be a little bit behind on that. But right now, we're not seeing a loss of employees to other locations, mostly because of COVID and the tough times and having positions available and things like that. We've been able to go through the pandemic. While we've been really slow in filling some positions, we have not had to cut positions or do layoffs. So while we have had a number of part-time people that haven't been able to get in the hours that they normally would be able to do, we have not had to release anybody because we've had less hours at the rec center, less hours at the library, things like that. And that is also adds into that savings through the course of the year. Because like I said, we're going to have pretty good size savings. Plus, we're looking at any retirements that come down the road, whether or not that position is someone that we want to refill with it or fill it in a different kind of way. If it's somebody who's been here a while, may fill it with a more of an entry level position. So always evaluating where we are as things come along.
And so from a succession planning perspective, do we have a succession plan at A that identifies those aging individuals who will possibly retire at a certain point, and how that looks from a fiscal perspective? Because as the Councilman Foster's point, we have to be fiscally sound while also doing what's right by our workers who didn't stop working during this entire pandemic. While some of us had the luxury of working from home, a lot of these individuals who work for us day in, day out, collecting trash or working in the city office, had to work every day. So I know we have to balance between being fiscally sound, but also doing what's right for our workers who were there for us. And so from a succession planning perspective, do we have a succession plan that not only speaks to a position that are open, filling the possible replacement of upcoming retirements, but how that looks from a fiscal perspective in terms of if one person retires, that is a savings of X if we replace them with the entry-level person?
Yes. And sometimes that can be 20 or 30% or more, depending on the position and the longevity.
Okay. So if based on that information, if we look at a forecast in terms of who is pending retirement or projected to retire this year, could we then do a 4% raise, or is it still more feasible to do the 3% with the 1% bonus?
I looked at it from the fact of longevity and keeping up with what's going on around us, making sure that we're rewarding the employees, giving them incentive to stay. I lean more towards COLA. Obviously, everything's happened over the past year than bonus, because sometimes the bonus just comes and goes, and then it's not really seen
Objective, correct?
in the salary. Yeah, and then ultimately that gets forgotten. You know, if you may have gotten, I don't know, $2,000 over the past couple of years in bonuses that aren't reflective in your pay. If it's a $37,000 employee, but you actually made 39, but you're still looking at that $37,000, even though you may have gotten a bonus. If it moves up to the 39, then you're continuing to see that progression as you're going through. And that's the other thing too. We want to build careers. I think that's something we've all encouraged. We want folks to start with us and stay with us. That helps you create the longevity. It also gives you the intellectual property of knowledge and background and things like that. So all those kind of things help play into this. And I do think that, with the savings that we've had in the insurance, the savings that we've had in the vacant positions, the savings that we are going to continue to have as folks retire, I think it's sustainable. I wouldn't present anything to you that wasn't sustainable. So hopefully that kind of goes back and answers maybe several other questions that came up before.
Thank you. That's all I have.
And just to be clear, this is not for a decision tonight on what we're doing. This is just for a discussion at this point. I think 4% worth of money to our city employees is the minimum that we should do. It's just how we choose to do that, whether it's all salary or salary and a bonus, or however we decide to do it. Or David, like you suggested, maybe saving 1% to see where we are in December to decide if that should be an additional salary increase, or even at that time, it could be determined to be a bonus, or any number of things. I just wanted to bring it forward because I did know that as awesome as this is, and as wonderful as it is to do this, it puts us in that position for next year where it's a little tighter. And again, hopefully we're in no problem next year, because we can look at things that way. I just wanted to give us the most flexibility possible to bring that up as a concept. Are there any other questions regarding compensation at this point in time?
David, could you follow up with us with just you looked a little bit hesitant when we were talking about the financial difference between doing the 1% bonus versus the 3% COLA plus 1% bonus and the 4% COLA in. Could you just follow up to just really nail down what that distinction would look like? And then also, I appreciated what sort of sounded like a compromise suggestion of a 3% COLA on July 1, then readdress in December. could you also sort of give us some sense of what that might look like? Those are two things that just follow up information. I know we're not going to be making the decisions tonight, but those would help me with this discussion. And I've appreciated everybody's perspective quite a bit. I also just my final say will just, for tonight will be, I think about, employees in terms of, if I want to buy a car or if I want to, buy a house, hopefully right here in Radford, then what my salary is really needs to be accurately depicted. And so that's why another one of the reasons that I lean towards doing the COLA. As David says, we want to build careers, and part of that is giving a person the ability to have the life that they envision here. So that's one of the reasons that I really lean towards that option. But I would appreciate if you could give us those additional pieces of information, David, because I think that they will help us all become more educated as we tackle this conversation.
Okay, let's see. How's the best way to explain it? So when you're building in a percentage increase, you're building in that base salary. So you're just like you're saying, that helps be able to for someone to go, get a loan, buy a house, those kind of things. It all goes to the bottom. They can't count on a bonus. The bonus, if it's a percentage, if it's a 1%, then your bonus for an entry level or part-time employee is less than it is if you're going up the scale. When we've done bonuses in the past, if it's been one at Christmas time, or I think we did one at the year end a few years ago, and you do a 250 or 300, that everybody gets the same bonus. Is not based on a percentage. Those bonuses run anywhere between about $39,000 for a bonus across the board. If you're doing $250 or something like that, all the way up to I think $105,000 was a $400 bonus I think we did a few years ago. And I'm quoting these off the top of my head. I'm trying to think back, and if Calista, if you or Dawn can remember any of those, I know you're on here as well. Please chime in. So I guess it's a matter of the philosophy, and I guess I'm thinking, trying to make sure that we're staying competitive, trying to make sure that we're recognizing the employees, trying to make sure that we're keeping up with cost of living, that we don't fall behind on that, and we're also providing, keeping up with minimum wage. I guess that's the reason I lean more towards COLA. People do it different ways, but and there's some that have done some combinations. That's why I was thinking about this other alternative. If you're stuck between the 3 and 4%, you could do 3% July 1, see how things go, do another 1% in December that kind of serves as a bonus at Christmas, and then also it adds to that bottom line. That's just one way to look at it. Or you can do a 3% and then do some kind of bonus, whatever it would be. You don't need to decide that tonight. In the fall or Christmas or after the first of the year, as you see things get better. And we're talking about the fiscal year 22, and then we'll be looking at this again when we get into budgeting for fiscal year 23. So I'm confident. I think everything can work, and what we're proposing works without any extra burden on taxpayers, because our focus has been, we've left all of the utility rates are level. We were originally talking about possibility of an increase in water and sewer. We've been able to keep that level. The only increase right now is in the real estate tax, and that is based on the need for the debt service for McCarty Elementary School. So, we're continuing to monitor that. If something happened, the economy didn't improve quite as fast, if we ended up having to freeze some positions, the departments would do that. That's what I would end up coming back and say, we're going to have to freeze 2 or 3 more positions, or look at some other retirements and that kind of thing going into the next year, to be sure that we don't run into a problem with longevity. And what we can do on this, we can publish the budget as we have it, and then once you get to public hearing and decide what you want to do with either 3 or 4%, the bottom line is still stay the same, and either go to reserve. We'll just balance with reserves or positive reserves, or just hold it until we see how the economy's doing, and then make a decision in December for that extra 1%. So it can go either way. I'm leaning towards the 4 July 1, but that may be another possibility is looking at 3, and then maybe another 1%, or doing the 3 July 1 and thinking about just a straight bonus, whatever it is, $200, $400, $500 as we approach the end of the year. And that kind of goes in with some of the other comments about seeing how things go. Does that answer your question? That's just kind of some thoughts.
So the only thing we really haven't done, are there any other priorities that you see that are not funded in the current budget that we need to consider? Forrest kind of alluded to that, we're balanced here and these are things we can do this year. And we're looking at this year's money, knowing that there's going to be an influx of some kind of money that's one-time money that we don't have all the information about, that we don't know how we can spend, that we don't know what exactly we're going to get. We need to kind of just stay within this budget, then we'll consider that piece as that comes about. Is there anything that's a priority for council here that is not reflected in the current budget that we need to consider? The only other thing that I'll say, and this seems to be a drumbeat, especially after a fairly rough winter with the roads, is paving. Whatever we're able to do to take care of some of those hot spots, I know that's going to improve quality of life. The other piece are the hours at the drop center. And I know we talked about that last time, just a little bit about what would it take to have some Sunday hours, to have it open 7 days a week. What would we have to look at with that? And I think you made that pretty clear that you didn't feel like we could do that fairly inexpensively, that it would be a whole other crew. Do you think it would be possible to borrow hours for that drop site from an hour here, an hour there, maybe a Tuesday hour and a Thursday hour, to have 2 hours on Sunday or something along that line? Or if we're serious about making a change so that that service is available a longer period, we have to figure something out financially with the budget.
And I have taken a look at that. I think we would need, and I'm sorry, I meant to follow back up with you all on this because we talked about it last time, but we talked about it at the regular council meeting. I think it would probably take 2 additional part-time people to fill a few hours on Sunday. We could only do so much because once the containers are picked up on Saturday, we wouldn't have anybody picking them up on Sunday. So whatever is left late in the day on Saturday, we could only stay open the hours it would take Sunday to finish filling them up and then get them disposed of on Monday. So there is a possibility that we could work some part-time hours out. I don't know if we've got quite the ability to shift around much. We've got a lot of work coming. It's been a rough winter, as you mentioned earlier. We've got doing all the utility cut repairs now. Asphalt's given us a bit of a challenge with the plants. We'd have to finish that up today or this week, and the asphalt company had some issues, but should be able to get that done. The guys are going through the neighborhoods and starting to fill neighborhood patches and things like that. We're going to have another extensive round of paving. We've got Wadsworth, Sundale, some of the heavier traveled streets that have gone through a rough time over the past few years, and they're approaching 8 to 10 years in their pavement life, which is a pretty good stretch for that. And then that's money that once we get the University Drive Bridge bids back, we'll see if we have some extra in reserves and be able to add more to that and get more of our streets paved. So that's definitely one of the biggest priorities in our public works side, is get streets taken care of.
So back on the drop center site, when you say a couple part-time people, we'd be looking, obviously we need to go on and just plan for $11 an hour minimum, maybe a little bit more than that, times 2 times however many hours per week. So that's going to be a couple $1,000s a year minimum, correct? I mean, that's kind of what we'd be looking at. Is that what you're thinking?
About $6,000 a piece.
Okay.
4 to 6.
Is that something that's supportable with the budget as it stands, or is this something we need to figure out how we're going to pay for if that's a priority for us?
No, we should be okay on that, because if you recall, 2 years ago, we raised the sanitation rate. We've been able to, it was because of some of the debt service requirements. As we're pulling away from that debt service, we're actually transferring some money into reserves current year and next year. So we should be able to accommodate that if we can find people to fill the positions.
So and that's always the other problem, which does get to our compensation. That always is the issue, but finding somebody that's willing to do the job. Jesse, did you have something?
Yeah, so I know some of the feedback that I'm getting, and I know other council members are as well, is that they're finding the containers full. And we're just talking about, we we'd have to close Sunday as soon as they were full. So my question is, do we need to budget in additional containers? So we are not running into that. So there's a place to put it so we can run the full hours that the community needs, because that is an ongoing concern.
And we all hear it.
We've got a couple of extra containers. We're checking on the hours to be sure. I'm not sure why the center was getting closed earlier. The containers are being hauled as soon as they get full. We've got a great company working with Pulaski on the pull of our containers, and that's working out really well. We're getting faster pulls than we've ever had. So anytime they're filling up, we have had some pretty heavy weekends where the weather's been good. Everybody's been shut in for a long period of time, and so much is coming in. I don't know that you could ever have enough containers or pulls on some of these Saturdays when we've really been hit heavy. But we're doing as good as we can and continuing to monitor that. Public Works Director and I had a conversation just before this to be sure that we're trying to keep those hours open and look at the containers that we've got.
Okay, I was going to say, like, how are we determining if we have enough or not? Just how many pools that we have, or I'd be curious how we're determining that, because that is something that I am hearing on a very consistent basis, is that the containers are full.
We're basing it on the volume that comes in, and the containers that we've got more containers now than we've ever had. We're just getting a lot more use of them, and one weekend you can fill completely up, and the next weekend you may only fill up 2 containers. It's just hard to gauge. They're trying to do as best they can with that, and then the haulers also watching it for us as well. But they pretty much come and haul as soon as we need the haul. So we've got that on top-notch list there. So hopefully you'll see that improving. It's growing pains too. We haven't been long in the new site, and when we moved, COVID was pretty much getting at its height. So now we're learning how people are getting out more and doing more outside and seeing how much the center's getting used. So I think you're going to see that improving over the coming weeks.
Can we go on and say that we're going to add 2 Sunday hours starting this summer if we can find the people for the positions?
If that's a priority of council, we'll make it happen.
Well, council, is that a priority? I mean, I hear that all the time, that folks want to be able to drop off on Sunday. If they've worked on a Saturday project, if they're wrapping things up on Sunday, Saturday at 3 is too soon for them to haul their stuff. What are you hearing? Is this something you want to see?
I personally see it. So, and then Wednesdays too, for some reason. On Wednesdays, I usually, I'll stay home, work from home on Wednesdays. And so, of course, I'm disheartened to realize I can't go dump stuff on a Wednesday. So either Sunday or Wednesday works for me, because, like as David mentioned, you're doing projects on a Saturday. By 3 p.m., you're not normally wrapped up with your project yet, whether it be yard work or something interior. And to close at 3 p.m. on a Saturday is a little shortened window that does not allow the person to dispose of their goods until Monday.
Other thoughts?
The Wednesday time, if we can keep that, we do need the time to be able to maintain the site, clean it up, do the hauls, those kind of things. That's kind of our fix-up day. Even though folks aren't coming in, we still need that day. I'll take a look at it with Tim to see if we can add an extra hour on Saturday and see what we can do for Sunday and send you a proposal.
Well, I was going to say, in regards to Sunday, while we're making those evaluations, if we were able to host that site every other Sunday, we'd be able to see if it's being utilized at the rate that is beneficial to the city to keep open or not. And I think the best way to assess that is to offer those hours and see what we get brought in.
I would say if we do it, let's do it for like 2 months straight, 3 months straight, see what happens. Then we can reevaluate. If it's not utilized heavy, I'm fine with saying, don't keep trying it. But I mean, that's one that I hear on a regular basis, and it hits, me. I mean, I think about it when I'm working on a project that I'm like, oh, that's right. And then Monday's a horrible day to try to go do it. So I know that's tough for most people. Now I get it. Not everybody has Saturday and Sunday off, and we're not just looking at that. And that's why we have hours spread out at different times through the week. But Naomi and Forrest, any thoughts?
David, if you can swing it, it's a priority for me. There is nothing worse than loading up your truck full of trash and realizing you've got a dirty truck full of trash that you're going to be hauling around for a few days and then needing to drop it off and your work clothes. So I know that it's going to be hard to do, but if we can do it, I know that this community would appreciate it. Every single person has had this experience of not being able to dump the trash. So, it's not uncommon. And I think that if we can take steps to mitigate it, it would go a long, long way.
Okay, sure. I'll see what I can do.
Forrest, what are your thoughts? Cool. All right. There's a million other things that I'd love to do if we had a giant bag of money that was endless and that we could do. And I think there are other things we absolutely need in the community. But David, I want to say, first of all, thank you to you and Callista and Dawn and Jenny and Melissa and everybody who helped put this budget together. That, I've gone through it and I think it's thorough for the needs of the community. I'm really proud that we're not asking taxpayers to pay an additional cent on anything other than the McHarg project, which was a community conversation that we've really had over the last 5 or 6 years that has culminated in the renovation and construction on McHarg. So I think we've done our due diligence there and tried to spread it out so that it's no burden at any one time for folks, because I do recognize it's a burden whenever it comes, but we've tried our best so that all of a sudden it's not this big mountain to have to climb. Thank you for everything you've done on the drop center itself, to everybody who's involved with that throughout Public Works and Sanitation. Thank you so much. I know we keep talking about it, but don't think we don't appreciate everything you're doing there. It even works tons better than it did at the other location, and we're so appreciative of that. We're just trying to tweak it to get it to that even higher level for everybody so that everyone is happy with that. Council members, is there anything else in this budget you want to discuss at this point in time? All right, hearing nothing.
Mayor, one quick thing. Just wanted to make sure after tonight, I need to go ahead and get advertising done, make sure everybody's good with the 84-cent tax rate advertisement. Everything else would stay level. And then we would publish the balanced budget as I have presented to you for public hearing on the 11th of April. So if everybody's good with that, we've got to get that advertised towards the end of this week, and we'll get the budget on our website. Everybody good with that?
And the date is the 12th of April for our public hearing, correct? That
Yeah,
Monday?
sorry. Yeah, Monday.
We're not coming in
I
on
just
this
wanted to
Monday.
confirm, because I was in the twilight zone for a second thinking, hold on now, I don't want to advertise the wrong date. So yes, I don't know. Council members, do you all think we need an additional meeting at this point in time to discuss any of the things that have come up tonight? I'm not seeing any consensus that we do. So I think I'm comfortable. I think everybody else seems to be comfortable with the budget as presented, which does include the tax rate of 84% advertised. Now, again, how that works, we can always have that discussion. It takes the 84 cents advertised to get us to what we need to do for the debt service for McHarg and to make sure that this year's budget is balanced as presented. Obviously, we have right to do anything up to that 84 cents from where we are now. It's just how do we figure it out at that point in time? And I just wanted to clarify that for everybody. We won't plan to meet again then as a council until the 12th. We'll have a public hearing at that regular council meeting where this budget can be discussed. And then we'll have our vote on the budget, our first vote that night. Correct? That's the plan. You have the public hearing and then our first vote that night.
Yep, first reading.
All right. Does anybody have any
The
questions?
tax rate and the budget. So those are two separate
Yes.
ordinances. So
Right,
those are both-
right. But they go hand in hand. Without one, you can't have the other. So there you go. Does everybody understand? Does anybody have any questions about process? Okay. So seeing none, we will plan to go ahead and advertise the budget and the tax rate as proposed for April the 12th for a public hearing and a first reading to take place at that meeting. Then we'll make any adjustments we need to from there. Okay.
Can I just interject something very quickly? A question that I have. I know the dump site, that was probably one of our biggest challenges when we come to council was trying to make the investment and figure this out. So one of the things, since we're looking at assessing needs, have we ever considered purchasing our own truck to remove the canisters to haul it ourselves? What would be most cost effective long-term for us as a city?
Yes, I have looked at that off and on over the past few years. It's incredible investment to do that at this point. I think as we make the transition to the new site, and we're getting a pretty good deal with the pulls that we've got now, and that seems to work efficiently. You're still stuck with the same problem if the landfill is closed or you're getting to the end of the day and the containers are full. It doesn't matter whether you haul them or somebody else hauls them. The expense in that hauling is owning the dumpsters, and there'd be probably at least 12 that we would need, plus 5 or 6 backups, and then you would have the expenses of the truck and the maintenance that goes along with that. So when we've been looking at that, it hasn't panned out to be cost effective at this point, but continuing to be something we look at.
Okay.
Any other questions? So with that, I am going to say to those citizens who may be watching who have questions, you can email any of us on council. Our council address is, for example, for me, it's david.horton@radfordva.gov, and all the other council members follow the same protocol with that. We want to hear from you. If you have questions, if you have concerns, we've pretty much laid out where it's going to go. As far as we can tell, we've had the debate over what we are trying to look at and where we can make any adjustments. But now is the time to have these conversations. And then, of course, the public hearing on April the 12th, we will be in person, barring any unforeseen complications. Our plan is to be in person at council chambers on April the 12th. And we will have a situation set up so that you can come through and make comment at that public hearing. You're also welcome to submit your comments in advance to Jenny Wilder, and she will help get those to us. We will also share any comments that we receive as council members. So having said that, we will entertain a motion to adjourn our work session.
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second.